Okay. Hey, cool. Yeah. So this is one video in a series of videos I want to do on getting started in terminal monopoly. Really just to help new programmers with learn the code base because it's not too well documented. Um, and also, if you can't come to casual coding or for some reason aren't able to meet with me during casual coding, oftentimes you miss out on the explanations I give then. And instead of like having you look through the code base on your own and potentially getting lost in it, I wanted to make this series of videos to really get you started and get you started on development, so you can start contributing as quickly as possible. And also, reading through documentation can be hard sometimes. Granted, documentation is a very good and very important part to any project, and I'm looking forward to updating the document. Excuse me, I'm looking forward to updating the documentation as well for this project. But this is really just a quick start guide, quick and dirty. Just watch the videos, and you'll be able to start coding by the end of it. So yeah, with that disclaimer in mind, this video is about the entry point to the program. Once you already have all the code on your Visual Studio Code or your IDE of choice, then we can begin testing the code and actually running the files. And obviously, there's a couple steps to that haven't been well documented up until now. So I'm looking to explain that in this video. So once you have all your files here, this just so we're all on the same page, the commit I'm on right now is this one with fish selling and the fish inventory. So this pull request was recently submitted, and that's the commit details at the bottom left there if you're interested. Your code base might look a little different, but we're going to keep the same entry point moving forward unless something significantly different happens. But for testing, you'll be using this anyway. Player.py is the entry point to the Terminal Monopoly program. That's very important. You can run player.py in your VS Code if you'd like, but I personally do not recommend doing this. I would create an external terminal, like command prompt, and run it here. I say that because you can't really full screen in VS Code, and part of this game is meant to be, or this entire game is meant to be played full screen. So always have an external terminal open, because that's also how the game is going to be played. Normally, it's going to be played, in the terminal. So now I actually have a custom terminal that puts me right where I want it to be, right here. And you can see it looks a little bit different, but I can go. But for the sake of this project, we're not going to be using my custom terminal. I'll probably try to release this profile when I can, but we'll get to that later. Okay, so to test it and run player.py, you need to change directory into your correct directory. So in this case, I'm at Terminal Monopoly, but we want the full directory path. So for that, you could probably right-click player.py and copy path or copy relative path. I'm just going to copy path, and then I'm going to type in cd for change directory, and then paste the path, and then get rid of the actual Python file because you don't want to run it. You just want the path there. Great. That's one way of getting to the directory. Alternatively, you can go to your file explorer, and wherever you set up this this repository, you should know where that is. Then you'll actually find it in here. So for example, I'll go to where's my PC? My PC, and then C drive. I'll go to users, Adam J, so on and so forth, into my coding folder. And then in this case, it's actually a tutorial. There's a couple other ones there, but this is all my stuff. And so you're just gonna, actually tutorial and then Terminal Monopoly. You're gonna copy that and type it in here as well, or we'll change directory and paste it here. Lastly, the other way to do it just raw in the terminal is something like this, where say you were back here, you're at your root of your command prompt, maybe at your username. Mine's Adam J. You could also do not ls but dir to list all the directories and then find it from there. This is raw command prompt. I'm not really going to teach any more command line commands. That's outside of the scope of this tutorial. Okay, great. So going back to our tutorial folder, tutorial, and you can type in tab when you're typing these things. So like TRM and then tab. It'll autofill the actual directory name if it exists. That's very nice. It'll make you faster. Okay, cool. let's clear the screen. Now, running player.py. This is pretty simple. And it should, how I type it in is player-m. So it runs, excuse me, not player-m. My bad. I'll do Python 3, because that's the Python type that's installed on my system. You might also have Python, but Python 3. And I do -m to run it as a module. This isn't strictly necessary, but in case other things aren't working, this might help. -m, and then I do player. Not player.py, but just player. Great, and then it runs. Real quick, just to show you what it would look like if you didn't do it like this. For me, for example, if I did Python -m player, it is going to work, so that's good. I don't actually have to do the Python 3 suffix. But if I did it as or -m and then player.py, you'll notice it's going to give you an error because there's no module named player.py. There's a module named player, but not player.py. So a little bit of a semantic difference there. Anyway, so let's run player. If you would like to host a game, press B. If you'd like to join a game, press P. I'll get more into this in the design philosophy and design considerations video. But everything that the user, me or you, reads when it's on my screen, it should be very readable, intelligible for the user. So the fact that I'm reading this aloud, it makes sense. If I would like to host a game, I press B. If I'd like to join a game, press P. Could it look a little nicer? Maybe. But everything you type that you're expecting the user to read, it should be very clear what you're trying to say. And that's why we have a tutorial that hasn't been implemented yet, but we have a tutorial.py that'll explain a lot of stuff as well. So now I have one command prompt open, and when I'm thinking in my head, I want to test the code of player.py. I would type in B because I want to create a second command prompt. I'll show you that in a second. But if I had multiple players, and if I already had a host open, or if I ran banker by itself for whatever reason, and I just want to join with this specific terminal, then I could just press P. And you'll see that that takes us immediately to the IP recognition or IP validation stage. Great, cool. I'm going to cancel out of that. By the way, it's Command-C or Control-C on Windows to quit a Python script. Very helpful. Won't always work if you have some threading issues. So there are other things there, but that's neither here nor there for now. So I'd like to host a game because I want one player, one terminal, and I want one banker. You're always going to have one banker. That's your server. You have to have a server if you're using network commands, but more on that later. Okay, cool. Yeah, so banker. And then it creates a second window you see right here. And if you actually hover over this, no, it doesn't tell you, but it's running Python, obviously. But it's running banker.py. You can see it's running banker.py because it's running a different file. So now it's giving us the calibration screen, Control-, Control+. So I'm going to press Enter to continue. Again, it's a little wordy, but the new user should read through all this. So I want to have 4 crosses or X's that mark the corner of the boards. So I'm going to press Enter. And you can see it did some stuff. Okay, now the screen looks terrible. And this is the first time I'm seeing this. But I see at the very bottom, press Enter to play, or press Enter to play, or press R to reset the display. What it said before was that there should be 4 X's in the corners of my screen. I see 1 X right up here, but I don't see any others. So I'm going to press R. And now if I look at it, this looks a little better. You can also manually change it by doing Control-. I'm going to press R one more time. And now look, I got the 4 X's. This looks pretty good. So I'm going to use this. Enter to play. Great. Now banker, here's banker. It's asking about the unit tests for banker. You can read through these at your leisure, but typically if you're testing by yourself with one other terminal, again, this terminal, player, then unit test 4 is very helpful because it doesn't have the Monopoly game, which means it's not going to be trying to send the game board to players and make them do Monopoly actions. And it's also just one extra terminal, right, the player terminal. So in this case, we're going to do unit test 4, but we'll do another one shortly. And then it gives you server started on this IP address, and it gives you a port number. So I'm going to copy that IP address, paste it here. Some terminals don't let you copy and paste. You'll just have to type it in. Sorry, not my fault. Port, I'm going to type in 3131 because that was the port that it gave me. And also, Banker says waiting for one client. You'll notice I connect after I type in my name, Adam. I connect, and it says got a connection. And then it said game in full, and it skipped to the screen. Cool. Enter to continue. Let's see if it connects. And you see it also did some screen calibration right then. It shrank the screen just a little bit because it thought that the minimum number of lines on the screen weren't enough. That's why I did that. And yeah, cool. So now we are in Banker. Looks like it's running correctly. Sometimes you'll see in Banker there's a game board around this region. There isn't in this case because it's not starting the Monopoly game. Having said that, yeah. But so yeah, that's where there's no game board in the center. It might appear, but it's not going to be updating because there's no game board in unit test 4. Okay. It also has some other information. Again, we just explained why it's not running Monopoly game. Cool. And some output areas. These are nice. How to use an output area? Well, for example, if I were to go to casino in player.py, and then typed in blackjack with a wager 100. Again, I'm the user. I'm reading through all these instructions, and I see, okay, this is how I type in a casino command. That's how I do it. Great. Right, so blackjack 100, and then it's doing the blackjack stuff, but I'm going to switch back to Banker for a second. Here's Banker. You see in casino output, it's got this list of lines, and it has a new line here. Cool, pretty cool. Now I'm going to do my blackjack, draw card, I press enter. I have 15, pretty hard to hit on 15. I think it's typical to hit on 15 though, so I'll hit. I got 21. So how this game works is actually you automatically win if you have 21. Great. You can see my balance updated. So that's a pretty cool module in the casino. And then updated Adam's balance by 200, new balance 100. Great. Pretty cool. That is how you test player.py, and then like from here you have all your module options, right? Fishing is broken right now, so that wasn't a good example, but this is where you would get to see what your module is doing if it's tied into player.py, meaning player.py has a command that allows you to access your module. To be more explicit, I can show you that. Let me shrink this huge terminal. If I go to the get_input function right here, again, read the comment, main loop for input handling while in the terminal screen, essentially just takes input from user, and if it is valid, we'll run the command on the currently active terminal. The green outline indicates the active terminal. Cool. So we're going to skip past if screen equals game board, because we're not in the game board screen. Rather, we're in the screen equals terminal screen. And these are all the commands that you can run, right? It's standard input is the input call we're getting, because literally what we're doing down here on this line when we typed fish is we're just responding to an input call, okay? And then we got all these like commands. This might be reworked eventually, but for now, this is how it works. So this is where you're testing your code. This is where you're writing additional commands if player needs to use those commands. And there's a little bit more nuance here, but outside of the scope of this video, that'll probably be a longer one later. Right, so that is how you run player.py, the entry point of your program. Let's talk about some of the debug arguments for just a little bit. I'm going to clear my screen, and here we go. By the way, if it seems like I'm typing in stuff really quickly, it's because I'm using the up and down arrow keys on my keyboard, which allow you to see the history of what you've typed into this. You can see like a lot of the history that we've been doing. So I'm gonna do player again, but this time I'm gonna type -debug. Ooh, now what's different here? You should notice a couple of things. For one thing, we have this little tag up here that says debug mode. Pretty cool. More importantly, notice that it skipped the calibration. For example, if I actually shrink this terminal, and let's just say I quit it actually, and then did debug. See how it's all messed up? It's because it skipped the calibration. It skipped the screen zoom in. Whereas if we did player, and then, well, I had to go through a couple steps for that. But normally, once you're connected, it'll do that screen calibration. So debug allows you to skip screen calibration. But it also skips the banker connection sequence. So I'm not connected to a server right now. So if I run something like bal to get my balance, you'll see it says in red, network commands are not available in debug mode. Can I do casino? No, network commands are not available in debug mode. Now, having said that, I'm going to exit and do debug. Well, with net is a parameter that you can add, or rather a system argument you can add at the very end that'll say, I know what I'm doing. I want to have network commands in debug mode. So really what it's doing, the reason you use these in combination is if you want to skip screen calibration because you don't want to waste your own time as a programmer, and you already know the IP address and port of the banker. So let me be more explicit and show you what I mean. I'm going to go tm locate and then python 3-m banker. I'm going to run banker by itself. Again, normally you don't do this anymore, but I know what I'm doing. I'm going to run 4. And again, we have this IP address. If we are to use withnet as a system arg, you also need to know the IP address and you need to know the port. And before the IP address, you need to put in your player name. So Adam, sure. And then we can do dash withnet. But first I'm going to show you without doing that. Am I? No, yeah, I'm not going to include withnet just yet. So I'm going to enter. And it says welcome to the game. That's something different than we got last time because it did do the connecting process. You can see the screen isn't the original, it's not the calibration, excuse me, it's not the it's not the connection screen. This is already back in that previous screen where usually the game board is displayed and we have all our output areas. Cool. Enter to continue. Tries to connect like we saw before. And great, yeah, now we're connected. And we know we're connected because this says player connected from. Cool. And now let's see if we can do our network arguments. Bal. Network commands are not available in debug mode. Okay, so what exactly is the point of doing debug mode with IP args and everything? It depends. It really depends on your circumstance, but you have the option now using the debug argument. So I'm going to exit, and you can see this closes as well. It doesn't close gracefully, but it closes. And the socket closes too, which is important. So now I'm going to do this, but with net. I'm going to run banker again. In fact, well, I'll get to that in a second. Looks good. 4, and we're running on the same port and IP address. So same port and IP address. So now with net, connect. You can see it skips calibration, skips the connection, enter to continue, and it's connected. So now let's try balance. Ooh, cool. It gets our balance. Now granted, it does still say network commands are not available in debug mode. This is a bug. It is a known bug. We'll fix it. But yeah, you can see we're in debug mode and we got our network commands. So we can even do like casino, coin flip, 1000, heads. Yep. But yeah, network commands work great. Very good, very good. I'm going to E to exit the casino and exit to exit the game. And you can see this closes as well. It actually closed more gracefully here because it said all connections dropped, receiver stopped, player disconnected. So it does close gracefully sometimes. Great. Lastly, so these are all the parameters that you have available for player at the moment. This might change as well, but just keep viewing the code base. Use these when you need to. Most of the time, you will be running just like this and manually inputting the IP address and port. But you have those options, so they are helpful. Debug is very helpful, especially if you're running or testing local modules, like calculator. When that was in development, this would have been helpful. But yeah, that's when you're going to use dash debug. Right. So, is there any banker system arguments, you might wonder? Yes, but they're few. You could do Python 3-m banker, and then I think you can do skip calib, which you'll notice. Well, it's very subtle, but it skips the calibration. So if I remove that, there's a calibration screen. It's going to do its thing, right? But skip calib will skip that, which is helpful for people who have who are having calibration issues for banker, and that haven't been handled yet. That's one way of doing it. Instead of actually just commenting out the code that's responsible for calibration, you can do the dash skip calib argument. Next thing you'll notice, and both of these are just for efficiency. They're not really changing the code very much. But when you're testing and you know exactly which unit test you're going to use you probably just want to skip past this page where it asks about unit tests. So what you could do is type in the number of the unit test. It has to be directly after banker, but then you can just enter, and you can see it gave us a screen, but obviously it started the server and it's waiting for clients. So it skipped the calibration and it chose unit test 4 because we typed in unit test 4. Some important things to notice is that it's not handling if you put in the wrong unit test and everything, so that's on you. You're the programmer, you should know this, because the users will not be using system arguments. They will not have that information, nor will they need to. And you can see all this stuff in Banker. Again, if we're talking about driver code, we usually go down to the very bottom of the file to look at if name equals main. And you got if calib. Oh, there is also the silent argument. This is going to be very rarely used. I imagine it would be used in case the banker, for whatever reason, should not be allowed to see a bunch of information. Information like people's balances changing in the casino, for one example. It just will hide all that information using this parameter verbose in screen space. Cool, yeah. So, yeah, you can see the skip calib here. And if skip calib isn't in the system args, then it won't, or it will. Excuse me, if it doesn't exist, then it's going to calibrate screen. That's what that's doing. Let's do a real quick code review of player.py as well's driver code. We can go all the way to if name equals main driver function for player. So if the first argument is -debug, or rather, if there's only one argument, again, where the argument is player, right? Because all the arguments follow -m, or if there was no -m, like player.py. That's your first argument, where it's the file name. If there's only one argument, then it's going to do the initialization step. It's going to do full screen. And then if the second argument, rather, is debug, then it's going to set this screen space variable to be true. And this is used to display your debug mode and a few other things that you can look through the code base if you're interested in. All right, if withnet is in the system args, again, anywhere in the system args, but it has to be in a correct space compared to the IP, then it has this large constant, net commands enabled equals true. Useful. That's doing what you'd expect it to. And then we have, if you have more than 5 arguments, meaning your command looks something like this. Player is the first argument, debug second argument, and then name, IP, and port. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arguments right here. So if you have, or rather, it's if you have 5 or more arguments, then you're in debug mode with args, where the args are name, IP, and port. And you can see that this is doing all that, reading through it. Great. And additionally, there's a little bit of error handling, but it's still going to close out your program. If it's not in debug mode, it's going to do full screen and calibration. We saw that earlier. And then it proceeds as normal. Yeah. So yeah, that is like the quick start of running player.py, entry point of the program. And I really encourage you to look through player.py's get input function, because that's kind of the next step on why some commands do some things and some commands do other things. Why other commands don't do anything. Get input is where your module is going to be called from, and then your module development can continue from there if you get input in your module, etc. But it has to always happen in player.py first. Cool. I think that's everything I wanted to cover in this video. So yeah.